In today's video, I'm about to share something I've never said out loud, something that still gives me goosebumps every time I think about it. It started one ordinary Thursday, laundry half done, dishes still in the sink, my husband rushing out the door with barely a glance back at me. "Work trip," he said. 3 days, maybe 4. I nodded like I always do. Routine, predictable, cold. I didn't know then that this trip would change everything. We weren't fighting, not exactly. But when the silence between two people becomes louder than words, you begin to wonder if you're still seen. For months, maybe even years, I felt like I was living beside my husband, not with him. Like a ghost floating through a life we built together, yet one I didn't feel a part of anymore. There were nights when he'd roll over without a word, mornings he'd rush off without a kiss. I stopped asking questions because I already knew the answers. His love had grown distant, and worse, I had stopped being surprised. But the universe has a strange way of shaking things up just when you least expect it. That weekend, something unexpected happened. Something that, if you had told me a week before, I would have laughed off as fantasy, or worse, temptation. But it happened, and it happened with them. I had seen them before, just neighbors really. 2 friends who had recently moved into the house across the street. Tall, confident, charismatic in a way that makes you glance twice even when you tell yourself not to. One of them, Jordan, always offered a smile whenever he saw me outside watering the plants or dragging the trash cans to the curb. The other, Malik, had this quiet intensity, like he was always watching, always reading people without saying much. I didn't know their story, but they were about to become part of mine. It started with a knock. That's all. Just a knock on the door that changed the rhythm of everything. Jordan was standing there with a package in his hands, one that had accidentally been delivered to their place. Just a neighborly gesture, right? Nothing unusual. But that moment, his eyes, the way he looked at me like he saw me, it was different. I hadn't felt that seen in so long. And when Malik joined him a few minutes later, asking if I needed help fixing the loose screen on my front window, I felt something I didn't expect. Nervous, giddy, alive. What followed wasn't just about attraction or loneliness. It was about connection, about rediscovering the parts of me I thought were long buried. Parts that my husband, despite all his roles, provider, partner, companion, had somehow never truly touched. And what unfolded over the next 2 nights left me breathless. But I'll tell you this much right now. It wasn't just one moment. It was a series of moments that blurred every line I thought I'd never cross. You might think you know where this story is going, but trust me, you don't. Because what happened next? It wasn't just unexpected. It was unforgettable. And by the time my husband returned home, I was no longer the same woman he left behind. But what did I do? How far did I let things go? And what happened when he found out? Stay with me. The truth is just beginning to unfold. The hours after that knock felt like something out of a dream I didn't know I had. It wasn't about the package Jordan brought. It was the way he looked at me, steady, warm, like he wasn't just looking at me, but into me. Malik stood a few steps behind him, arms crossed, quiet, but present. There was something about the way they carried themselves, like they didn't need to say much to make their presence known. I invited them in, just for a moment, just to be polite. But in that small moment, everything shifted. We talked, first about nothing at all, neighbors, weather, how quiet the street had gotten lately. They complimented the house, asked if I'd done the decorating myself. I laughed, said I tried my best. And then, one of them asked, "So, is your husband around?" I paused. My fingers tightened around the edge of the countertop. "He's away," I replied. Simple, honest, but I could feel the meaning of that sentence hang in the air a little too long. I wasn't used to attention, not like that, and definitely not from men who looked at me like they noticed the details, the chipped nail polish, the tired smile, the flicker of something still burning behind my eyes. I had forgotten what that felt like, to be seen without trying. The next day, I saw them again. Jordan was washing his car, shirt off in the late afternoon sun. Malik sat on the front steps, scrolling through his phone, glancing up every now and then. I waved, just a neighborly wave, but my heart thudded a little too loud in my chest. I wasn't looking for trouble. I didn't even know what I was feeling, but something had been set in motion that I couldn't stop. My husband had texted that morning. "Flight delayed, might be gone another night." No, "I miss you." No, "How are you?" Just cold logistics. I stared at the message for a long time before setting my phone down without replying, and I asked myself a question I hadn't dared to think about until then. Why did it feel like I didn't miss him? That evening, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was Malik, alone. He smiled, said he was just checking in. Something about the way he stood there, confident, calm, direct, made me invite him in without a second thought. We talked. And this time, it got a little more personal. He asked if I was happy. No one had asked me that in a long time, and for the first time in years. I didn't know how to answer. That night, I lay awake, replaying every word Malik said. His question, "Are you happy?" echoed in my mind like a challenge I hadn't been brave enough to face before. I wanted to say yes. I needed to say yes. But deep down, I knew the truth was more complicated. I loved my husband. I wanted to love him. But something had been missing for so long that I couldn't remember what it felt like to be truly connected. The loneliness wasn't just about his absence. It was about the space between us that grew wider every day. The silence that screamed louder than any argument. And now, with Jordan and Malik stepping into my world, that silence was suddenly filled with possibility and confusion. Jordan and Malik weren't just neighbors anymore. They became unexpected friends. Voices I found myself wanting to hear at the end of the day. They listened without judgment. They laughed at my jokes, even the bad ones. And they made me feel alive in ways I hadn't felt in years. But with that came a gnawing guilt I tried to push down. What was I doing? Was this wrong? Was I betraying the vows I made? Meanwhile, my husband's texts were sparse and distant, each one colder than the last. I started to wonder if he even cared what was happening at home while he was away. Was his distance a sign he was already checked out? Or was he dealing with something I didn't know? I couldn't tell anyone about Jordan and Malik, not my friends, not my family. What would they say? Would they judge me? But keeping it all inside was suffocating. Every day, the tension built like a storm ready to break. And in the middle of it all, I realized that what I needed wasn't just physical. It was connection, understanding, someone to see me again. But what would happen when the truth finally came to light? Would everything I held together come crashing down? I was standing at a crossroads, unsure which path to take, and terrified of what each choice might mean. Days passed, and the tension in my chest tightened like a noose. Every glance at my phone made my heart race. Would it be him? Another distant message? Or would it be Jordan or Malik reaching out again? The lines between right and wrong blurred more with each passing moment. I wasn't proud of the secret I was carrying, but I couldn't deny how alive I felt when they were near. It was as if they were filling a part of me that had been empty for too long. One evening, Malik showed up unannounced. There was a seriousness in his eyes I hadn't seen before. He said he wanted to talk, really talk, about everything, about how I was feeling, about what I wanted. For a moment, I thought I could tell him the truth, but the words caught in my throat. How could I explain the loneliness that had crept in over years? How could I admit the way their presence stirred something inside me that my husband never had? At the same time, Jordan's calls grew more frequent, his voice warmer, more urgent. I found myself craving those conversations in the quiet nights when the house felt too empty. I was caught between two worlds, the life I promised to my husband and this new, dangerous connection that challenged everything I thought I knew. Then, out of nowhere, a message from my husband shook me to my core. "I'm coming home early. Be ready." Panic surged through me. What would he see? What would he know? Could I keep this secret locked away? Could I face him again, pretending nothing had changed? I stood alone in the quiet house, the weight of my choices pressing down like never before. The moment I'd been avoiding was fast approaching, and with it, the inevitable reckoning. How would this all end? Would I lose everything I thought mattered, or would I find something I never expected? The answers were coming, and they would change everything. Just as I was trying to steel myself for my husband's early return, something happened that I never saw coming. One evening, Jordan showed up at my door with a look of worry I'd never seen on him before. He said, "We need to talk. It's about Malik." My heart skipped, not because I feared for Malik, but because suddenly everything felt even more complicated. What could he mean? What had I gotten myself into? Jordan explained that Malik had been dealing with something serious, something he hadn't shared with me or anyone else. It was clear Malik was struggling, and Jordan was worried that if I got involved too deeply, it could put me in a difficult spot. I felt a rush of emotions, confusion, protectiveness, fear. I hadn't just been caught in a moment of loneliness. I had stepped into a world that was more complicated and dangerous than I'd imagined. At the same time, I was still trying to prepare for my husband's unexpected return. I kept asking myself, how would he react if he knew about Jordan and Malik? Would he be angry, hurt, or worse? Would he already know something I didn't? The silence between us felt like a thick wall, and now the cracks were starting to show. To make things more tangled, Malik started acting distant and secretive. The easy conversations we shared vanished, replaced by pauses and glances I couldn't read. I tried to reach out, but he shut me out in a way that made me feel both desperate and powerless. I was losing the only comfort I had found during these lonely days. Meanwhile, my husband's return date kept moving closer, and the weight of my choices pressed heavier on me. Every day, I felt like I was walking on a razor's edge. One wrong step, and everything could come crashing down. The fear of losing my marriage, my dignity, and the fragile new connections I'd made was overwhelming. I realized I was caught between three people, each pulling me in different directions. My husband, who was supposed to be my partner, Jordan and Malik, who had awakened something inside me I thought was dead, and now, the secrets and lies weaving around us were tighter than ever. I didn't know what was going to happen next. All I knew was that my life was spinning faster, the tension unbearable, and the truth waiting to explode in ways I wasn't prepared for. The question was, could I survive what was coming? The day my husband walked through the door felt like the world had tilted on its axis. My heart hammered in my chest as I heard the familiar click of the lock and then his footsteps coming down the hallway. I tried to steady my breathing, telling myself I could handle whatever was about to happen. But the truth was, I was terrified. Terrified of his reaction. Terrified of the truth finally coming out. He looked different somehow, quieter, more serious. When our eyes met, I saw a mix of confusion and hurt. I wanted to explain everything. The loneliness, the way Jordan and Malik had made me feel alive again, the secrets I'd kept. But the words caught in my throat. Before I could say anything, he spoke first. "I know." Those two words hit me like a punch. How could he know? Had he suspected all along? Or was there something else I didn't see coming? I stared at him, searching for answers, but he just shook his head and sat down. Exhaustion and pain written all over his face. Then he told me the truth. While he was away, he'd been dealing with his own struggles, things he hadn't shared because he didn't want to burden me. He admitted he'd felt distant, not because he didn't care, but because he was fighting his own battles alone. The silence between us had been two people breaking in their own ways, never realizing how much the other was hurting. Hearing that, something inside me shifted. The anger and guilt I'd felt started to melt away, replaced by a fragile understanding. We weren't perfect. We'd both been lost. But maybe there was a chance to find each other again. Just as I reached out to take his hand, the doorbell rang. My heart skipped. Who could it be now? I opened the door to find Malik standing there, holding an envelope. His eyes were intense, and for a moment I wondered if this was the moment everything would fall apart. He handed me the envelope without a word and left. Inside, I found a letter, not from Malik, but from Jordan. It revealed a secret I never expected. Malik had been hiding more than just personal struggles. There were things about his past, things that could change everything I thought I knew. As the weight of the letter settled in my hands, I looked back at my husband. The story wasn't over, not yet, and neither was I. Holding that letter in my hands, I felt the weight of everything, the lies, the secrets, the loneliness that had pulled us apart. Jordan's words were honest and raw. He explained Malik's past struggles, his fears, and why he'd kept so much hidden. It wasn't just about him. It was about protecting everyone involved, including me. I realized then that the people who had entered my life unexpectedly were carrying their own burdens, just like my husband and I. That moment made me think about how easy it is to judge from the outside, to assume things about others without knowing their whole story. We all have parts of ourselves we hide, and sometimes those hidden parts shape our choices more than we realize. The love I thought was missing wasn't gone. It was just buried beneath layers of pain, fear, and silence. When I looked up, my husband was watching me closely, waiting. I decided to be honest, not just about Malik and Jordan, but about my feelings too. I told him how lonely I'd felt, how lost, and how much I wanted to try again, to really connect. He listened, and for the first time in a long time, we talked. Not just as partners going through the motions, but as two people willing to face the truth together. The days that followed weren't perfect, but they were real. We started rebuilding, brick by brick. My connection with Jordan and Malik shifted too. We found a way to respect boundaries and support each other without crossing lines that could hurt more than heal. Looking back, I understand now that marriage, relationships, and life itself aren't about perfection. They're about honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to face hard truths. Sometimes the people we think have failed us are just fighting battles we can't see. And sometimes the unexpected moments that shake us the most are the ones that teach us how to truly live. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this. Don't ignore the quiet cracks in your relationships. Listen, reach out, and be brave enough to face the messy parts, because healing often starts in the places we're most afraid to look. Thank you for staying with me through this true story. If you've ever felt lost or lonely in your own relationship, know you're not alone. And maybe, just maybe, there's a new beginning waiting on the other side of pain.